Looking back, it's strange to think about how perfect everything seemed, at least on the surface. My name is Ryan, I'm 34, and I work as an IT specialist for a mid-sized company. It's a solid job that I've had for the past decade, providing enough stability for my wife, Emily, and me to live comfortably in our modest suburban home. Emily, 32, is a freelance graphic designer. Her creativity always amazed me, and I used to admire how passionately she spoke about her projects. We've been married for 8 years, and for a long time, I thought we had the kind of marriage others envied. We didn't have kids yet, but we often talked about the future, about traveling more before settling down. Emily would always joke about designing the perfect nursery someday. Lately, though, things had changed. At first, it was small things, little ripples in what I thought was still a calm sea. Emily seemed more distant, more absorbed in her own world. She started spending more time on her phone or laptop, and while she insisted it was for work, there was a shift in her energy that I couldn't quite put my finger on. She wasn't laughing at my jokes as often. Our conversations became shorter, and date nights started feeling forced. I told myself it was normal. Everyone has phases in a marriage where the spark dims a little, right? Work gets busy, life gets in the way, and routines can make things feel a bit stale. I reasoned that we just needed to find a way to reconnect, maybe plan a weekend getaway to recapture the fun we used to have. But in hindsight, I should have seen the warning signs. The unspoken tension, the guarded look she gave me when I asked simple questions about her day, and the way she angled her phone screen away from me, all of it pointed to something more. I just didn't want to admit it. What happened next blindsided me. It was like discovering a crack in the foundation of a house you thought was unshakable, only to realize the whole structure was crumbling. It started with something so mundane, something I'd never done before. I downloaded a dating app. At the time, I didn't even know why I did it. Maybe it was boredom or curiosity. Maybe it was a way to validate myself in the face of Emily's growing disinterest. What I didn't expect was to find her profile staring back at me, a profile that would lead to the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The distance between Emily and me grew more noticeable as the weeks went on. It wasn't just the usual ups and downs of a relationship anymore, it felt like a wall was forming between us. She had always been busy with her graphic design projects, but lately, she seemed glued to her phone. "I've got a lot of deadlines coming up," she'd say when I asked about her late nights in the living room. She'd be curled up on the couch, her laptop balanced on her knees, and her phone close by. I wanted to believe her, but the way she'd glance at me when I entered the room, like she was checking to see if I was looking, put me on edge. There were other small things too. She started staying up long after I went to bed. When I'd ask her to join me, she'd insist she needed to finish up some work or decompress. And she'd grown more irritable, snapping at me over minor things or deflecting my questions with a sharp, "Why are you being so paranoid?" The shift in her behavior wasn't sudden. It crept in slowly, like a fog rolling over our once clear connection. I chalked it up to stress or a creative rut. Freelance work could be unpredictable, and I knew how much she valued her independence. But even then, I couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling settling in my gut. One night, as I passed by her on the couch, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen. She quickly tilted it away, her movements a little too quick to be casual. "What's so secretive?" I joked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just work emails," she replied without looking up, her voice tight. The conversation stuck with me. There was something off about how she brushed it aside. I wasn't the type to snoop, we'd always trusted each other, but her evasiveness gnawed at me. A few days later, while scrolling aimlessly through my phone during a quiet evening, I saw an ad for a dating app pop up. It was one of those moments where boredom met curiosity, and without thinking much of it, I downloaded the app. I wasn't planning to use it seriously. I wasn't looking for anything. It was more of a distraction, something to occupy my restless mind. But as I set up a basic profile and began browsing, my stomach dropped. There it was, her profile. The picture was unmistakable. It was Emily, wearing a dress I remembered from a dinner date we'd had a few months ago. The bio wasn't long, but it had details only she would know: her love for coffee shops, her passion for graphic design, and a subtle mention of her favorite hiking spot. I stared at the screen, hoping I was wrong, that maybe it was some kind of coincidence or a cruel joke. But the more I looked, the more I knew it couldn't be anyone else. My heart pounded as I debated what to do next. Should I confront her immediately? Should I ignore it and pretend I hadn't seen anything? Instead, I decided to dig deeper. If this profile was real, I needed more than just a passing glimpse. I couldn't stop staring at the screen. My hand hovered over the button to close the app, but something deep inside wouldn't let me. It wasn't just the shock of seeing Emily's face on a dating app, it was the details. She had listed herself as single, which felt like a slap in the face. After several minutes of deliberation, I made the decision to create a fake profile. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but I needed answers. If I confronted her without evidence, I knew she'd deny it. This way, I could find out the truth without giving her a chance to spin a story. I picked a generic photo from the app's stock options, created a profile with minimal details, and started searching. It didn't take long to find her. There she was again, smiling like the woman I thought I knew so well. My heart pounded as I clicked the like button. A few seconds later, a notification popped up: it's a match. I froze. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly. She had already liked my fake profile, which meant she was actively swiping. My mind raced with questions. How long had she been doing this? How many other people had she matched with? And why was she even on here in the first place? I stared at the chat window for a while before typing a simple message. Hey, you seem interesting. What brings you here? I felt sick as I waited for a reply, part of me hoping she wouldn't respond. But she did, almost immediately. Hi. Just looking to meet new people. What about you? Her casual response hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no hesitation, no sign of guilt. She was completely at ease, as if this was just another normal conversation. I continued chatting, each exchange driving the knife deeper. She laughed at my jokes, shared details about herself that confirmed it was her, and even hinted at meeting up. I kept the conversation light, but my mind was in turmoil. Then she said something that broke me. I've met a few interesting people here already. It's been fun. I didn't know what to feel: anger, sadness, humiliation. I was torn between wanting to confront her right then and needing to gather more evidence. I asked her where she'd met these people and if she'd gone out with anyone recently. She replied with a winking emoji and said, maybe. Winking face. At that moment, I knew I had to stop. I couldn't stomach reading any more. I logged off and set my phone down, my hands trembling. The woman I'd trusted for 8 years was leading a double life, and I had just uncovered it in the most unexpected way. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her profile, her messages, the casual way she was planning meetups behind my back. By morning, I knew I had to figure out what to do next. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. Sleep had evaded me, and the weight of what I'd discovered sat heavily on my chest. Every moment replayed in my mind: her profile, the match, the messages. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unravel, not my own. But it was my life. And now I had to face it. I reopened the app, scrolling through the conversation I had with her the previous night. As much as it hurt, I needed to see how far this had gone. I noticed something new, a message from her. "When are you free to meet up?" Smiling face with smiling eyes. My stomach turned. There it was, in black and white. She wasn't just flirting, she was actively planning to meet someone. I felt a surge of anger. This wasn't just a mistake or a fleeting lapse in judgment, this was deliberate. I debated replying, setting up a meeting just to see how far she'd go, but the thought of seeing her in that situation made me sick. Instead, I logged out of the app and went to our shared email account, something we'd set up early in our marriage for joint responsibilities. It wasn't something I checked often, but I wondered if there might be more clues there. I didn't have to look far. In the sent folder, I found an email she had written to a man named Aaron. It was from a few days ago, sent while I was at work. "Had a great time last weekend. Can't wait to see you again. Let's plan something soon." Attached to the email was a photo of her, smiling, carefree, and wearing a dress I hadn't seen in months. The timestamp on the email was from Valentine's Day, a night she'd claimed to have spent working on a big project for a client. I closed the laptop, feeling the walls close in around me. The lies weren't just in the app, they were woven into the fabric of our lives. The profile, the messages, the email, they painted a picture of someone I didn't recognize. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, alternating between anger and heartbreak. I replayed every moment from the past few months, searching for signs I'd missed. Had she been doing this all along? Was there something I could have done to stop it? By the evening, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I needed to confront her. When Emily came home, I tried to act normal. She greeted me with her usual smile, but I couldn't return it. As she put her bag down and sat on the couch, I felt the tension between us thickening. "Is everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head like she genuinely didn't know. I stared at her for a moment, trying to summon the right words. "Emily," I began, my voice unsteady. "Do you have something you want to tell me?" Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I could see the panic creeping into her eyes, the way her body stiffened. She knew. "Don't play games with me," I said, my voice firmer now. "I know about the dating app. I know about Aaron." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. "I can explain," she whispered. But I wasn't ready to hear her excuses, not yet. Emily's words hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. "I can explain." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stared at her, waiting for her to fill the silence. My heart was pounding, anger and sadness warring for control. She avoided my eyes, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater, as if she were trying to find the right excuse. "Ryan, it's not what you think," she said finally, her voice trembling. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Not what I think. I found your profile, Emily. I saw the messages. I know about Aaron. What part of this am I misunderstanding?" Her face flushed, and tears welled up in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I swear, it wasn't. I was just. I don't know, I was bored, and things between us felt stale. I made the profile for fun, just to see if anyone would notice me. I didn't mean for it to turn into this. Bored?" The word hit me like a slap. "We've been married for 8 years, Emily. If you were bored, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't we figure this out together?" Instead, you decided to swipe through strangers and start sneaking around. She sobbed, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to reach out and hold her the way I had so many times before. But the other part, the part that had spent the past 24 hours reeling from her betrayal, kept me rooted in place. "I never meant to hurt you," she said through her tears. "I didn't even think you'd find out. It was just, I don't know, a distraction. Something to make me feel alive." Her words stung. Alive? Was I not enough to make her feel that? Was our life together so unfulfilling that she had to turn to strangers for validation? I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to process everything. "So, what? You're telling me this was just some harmless fun? That you didn't actually meet anyone?" She hesitated. "It was only for a moment, but it was enough." "Emily," I said, my voice low and steady, "tell me the truth." I did meet Aaron," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it wasn't serious. We just had coffee a few times. It didn't mean anything." I felt my stomach twist. The lies were unraveling, but I knew there was more. There had to be. "Coffee?" I asked, my voice rising. "You're telling me you were meeting him for coffee while I was sitting at home, thinking you were working late? Do you even hear yourself?" "I know it sounds bad," she said quickly, her voice desperate now. "But it's over. I ended it. I swear, Ryan. It's done. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me." I repeated, my voice breaking. "Do you have any idea how much damage you've already done? Do you even understand what this has done to me, to us?" She reached out, but I pulled away. I couldn't let her touch me, not now. "I don't know if I can do this," I said finally, my voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can forgive you." Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. My mind was a storm of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and the faintest glimmer of hope that maybe, somehow, we could fix this. But as I sat there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, I realized that the foundation of our relationship had cracked. Whether or not it could be repaired was something I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. The days after our confrontation were a blur. Emily tried to act like things could go back to normal, but I wasn't ready to let that happen. I felt like a stranger in my own home, walking on eggshells around someone who had torn my heart apart. She apologized constantly. "Ryan, I'm sorry," became her mantra. But every time she said it, it felt like another wound opening. Her words were meaningless to me now, empty gestures trying to patch a hole too deep to repair. I began spending more time at work, leaving early and staying late to avoid the tension at home. My colleagues noticed my withdrawn demeanor, but no one pried. I wasn't ready to share what I was going through, not with friends, not with family, not even with myself. When I was home, Emily seemed desperate to fix things. She'd cook dinner, suggest we watch a movie, or sit next to me on the couch, trying to make conversation. But all I could think about was her profile, her messages, and her time with Aaron. At night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed, an invisible wall between us. Sometimes, I'd hear her crying softly, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. My own emotions were overwhelming enough without adding hers to the mix. One night, as I lay staring at the ceiling, I tried to make sense of how we got here. Had I missed the signs? Had I been so consumed with work or routine that I didn't notice her slipping away? Was this my fault? I replayed our marriage in my mind, searching for moments where I might have failed her. There were times when I worked late, times when I didn't pay enough attention to her hobbies or interests. But wasn't that normal? Every marriage had its ups and downs, didn't it? Then I thought about the good times, the vacations, the inside jokes, the way she used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. Those memories felt so distant now, like they belonged to another couple entirely. The following morning, Emily approached me as I was getting ready for work. "Ryan," she said, her voice tentative. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to avoid the conversation entirely, but I knew we couldn't keep circling the same drain. "Fine," I said, sitting down at the kitchen table. She joined me, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I know I've hurt you, and I hate myself for it. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Therapy, couples counseling, anything you need." Her words sounded sincere, but I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt in my mind. Could I trust her again? Did I even want to try? "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I admitted. "I don't even know if I want to fix this, Emily. What you did, it's not something you just bounce back from." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I do. But please, give me a chance to prove to you that I'm committed to us. I'll delete the app, cut all contact with Aaron, whatever you need." I didn't have an answer for her. All I knew was that the pain was still raw, and no amount of promises could erase what she'd done. In the days that followed, I let Emily take the lead in her so-called efforts to make amends. True to her word, she deleted the dating app in front of me, her hand trembling as she confirmed its removal. She even showed me her phone to prove that Aaron's number was blocked. "I'll do anything, Ryan," she said one evening, her voice thick with desperation. "Just tell me what you need." But that was the problem, I didn't know what I needed. Some part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that this was salvageable. Another part, the louder one, screamed that it was too little, too late. She suggested couples counseling, and though I initially resisted, I agreed to at least try. Maybe it would help me find some clarity, if nothing else. Our first session was awkward, filled with long silences and hesitant words. The therapist asked Emily to explain why she felt compelled to go on the app in the first place. "I don't know," she said, twisting her hands in her lap. "I think I felt invisible. Like Ryan didn't see me anymore. And the attention, the compliments, it made me feel alive again." I clenched my jaw, trying not to react. Her words felt like a slap, but the therapist quickly turned the focus to me. "Ryan, how does hearing that make you feel?" "Angry," I said bluntly. Like I wasn't enough for her. Like all the years we spent together didn't matter because some stranger on an app could give her a compliment. Emily looked down, tears welling in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to soften my tone. I was here to be honest, not to protect her feelings. The sessions continued over the next few weeks, and while they helped us communicate more openly, the underlying tension remained. Trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been shattered. At home, Emily made every effort to show her commitment. She cooked meals, left me handwritten notes apologizing for what she'd done, and tried to initiate conversations about our future. But no matter how hard she tried, I couldn't shake the image of her profile on that app, the messages to Aaron, the betrayal of everything we'd built together. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, she reached over to hold my hand. Her touch felt unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone I didn't recognize. I pulled away, and the hurt on her face was palpable. "Ryan," she said softly, "please don't shut me out. I'm trying. I know I made a horrible mistake, but I'm doing everything I can to fix it." "I know you are," I said, my voice flat. "But that doesn't mean I can just forget." She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. I don't expect you to forget. I just hope. I hope someday you can forgive me. I didn't respond. Deep down, I wasn't sure if forgiveness was possible, or if I even wanted it to be. Despite Emily's repeated efforts to mend the cracks in our marriage, something between us remained irrevocably broken. I found myself questioning every interaction, every word, every gesture. Was she being genuine, or was this just another performance? One evening, as I was scrolling through my phone in the bedroom, I noticed Emily had left hers charging on the nightstand. For weeks, she had insisted she had nothing to hide, but I couldn't shake the paranoia gnawing at me. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. Her messages had been cleared, and her call logs were empty, a red flag in itself. But one app remained buried in a folder labeled Utilities. It wasn't the dating app, it was a private messaging app one hadn't noticed before. My hands trembled as I opened it. At first, it was empty, but then I found a chat labeled A. My stomach sank as I clicked on it. The messages were sparse, but they told me everything I needed to know. Aaron, missed you today. Can't wait until we can talk again. Emily, I know, me too. It's been so hard, but I have to keep trying with Ryan. Aaron, take your time. I'll wait as long as you need. The date on the messages was just 2 days ago. A surge of anger and betrayal coursed through me. She had sat across from me at dinner that night, telling me she was committed to fixing our marriage, all while messaging him behind my back. I stormed into the living room, where Emily was sitting with her laptop, oblivious to what I'd just discovered. She looked up and smiled faintly, but her expression quickly shifted when she saw the phone in my hand. What's this? I demanded, holding the screen out toward her. Her face drained of color. Ryan, I can explain. Don't, I cut her off. Don't even try. You promised me. You swore you'd cut him off, but here you are, still talking to him, still lying to me. It's not what you think, she said, her voice trembling. I was just trying to let him down gently. I didn't want to make things worse. Worse? I interrupted, my voice rising. You've already destroyed everything, Emily. How could you possibly make this worse? Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. My own pain had consumed any sympathy I might have felt. You don't get to do this, I continued. You don't get to string me along while keeping him on the side. I'm done, Emily. I can't do this anymore. Ryan, please, she begged, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I've given you every chance to fix this, to prove that you wanted this marriage to work, I said, my voice breaking. But all you've done is lie. I don't even know who you are anymore. For the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. Ryan, don't leave. Please, don't give up on us. But I had already made up my mind. I think it's time you start packing, I said coldly. This marriage is over. The words felt heavy, final, but also freeing. As I walked away, I felt the weight of her betrayal lift slightly, replaced by a growing sense of clarity. It was time to put myself first. The days after I asked Emily to leave were some of the most surreal of my life. She packed her things in silence, her tear-streaked face a constant reminder of the life we had built, and destroyed, together. She moved out the next day, taking only what she needed and leaving behind the remnants of our life, shared photos, gifts we'd exchanged over the years, and a quiet, empty house that now felt like a tomb. I told only a few close friends and family members about what had happened. Everyone was shocked. My parents, who had always adored Emily, were at a loss for words. My best friend, Mark, was furious on my behalf. Good riddance, he said over beers one night. You deserve better than someone who'd treat you like that. But no amount of reassurance could erase the pain or the questions that kept me up at night. Had I missed the signs? Had I somehow failed her as a husband? Emily's betrayal spread through our circle of friends like wildfire. It wasn't long before mutual acquaintances started reaching out, some offering support, others fishing for details. What I hadn't expected was how quickly people began to turn on Emily. "She messed up big time," one friend texted me. "I can't believe she'd throw away everything you guys had." Even her closest friends distanced themselves. I heard through the grapevine that Aaron, the man she had risked everything for, had broken things off shortly after she moved out. Apparently, he hadn't been interested in more than a fling, leaving Emily to deal with the fallout alone. Meanwhile, Emily's professional life began to unravel. Her freelance clients, many of whom were referrals from friends, started pulling their projects. Word of her affair had spread further than I realized, and her reputation suffered for it. At first, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. But as the days turned into weeks, that satisfaction faded, replaced by a hollow emptiness. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late to avoid going home to an empty house. Mark dragged me out a few times, insisting that I couldn't let this ruin my life. "You need to move on, man," he said one evening. "She's not worth this." He was right, of course. But moving on was easier said than done. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of Emily, our favorite restaurants, the coffee shop where she used to work on her designs, the hiking trails we once loved. I wanted to forget her, to erase the pain she had caused, but it wasn't that simple. The first few weeks after Emily moved out were the hardest. The silence in the house was deafening, and I often found myself staring at old photos or mementos of our life together. Each memory felt like a double-edged sword, comforting and painful all at once. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. Mark was relentless in his efforts to pull me out of my funk. He invited me to join him for hikes, introduced me to new hobbies like rock climbing, and even convinced me to try a cooking class. "You need to find yourself again," he said one day as we stood at the top of a trail overlooking the city. "This isn't just about her anymore. It's about you." He was right. I had spent so much time wrapped up in the betrayal and what it meant for my marriage that I hadn't thought about what it meant for me as an individual. I began focusing on things I had neglected during my marriage. I started going to the gym regularly, not just to stay in shape but to clear my mind. I picked up guitar lessons, something I had always wanted to do but never made time for. My family, too, became a lifeline. My mom invited me over for dinner more often, and my dad offered quiet, steady support. They didn't push me to talk about what happened, but their presence reminded me that I wasn't alone. One evening, while cleaning out the closet, I came across a box of old journals. They were from years ago, back when I used to write as a way to process my thoughts. I flipped through one and decided to start journaling again. At first, the pages were filled with anger and sadness. I poured out every emotion I had bottled up, every question that still lingered. But over time, my writing shifted. I started reflecting on what I wanted for my future, on the kind of life I wanted to build for myself. As I worked on rebuilding my life, I heard bits and pieces about Emily. Her freelance business had taken a significant hit, and she was struggling financially. Mutual friends told me she had tried reaching out to them for support, but most were hesitant to get involved. One night, I received a text from her. It was short and apologetic. "Ryan, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry again. I'll always regret what I did to us. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Finally, I typed back. I appreciate the apology, but we've both made our choices. I hope you find peace someday. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was enough. For the first time, I felt like I was truly letting go. After I replied to Emily's text, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't forgiveness, not in the traditional sense, but it was a release from the weight I'd been carrying. Her apology didn't erase the pain or undo the betrayal, but it allowed me to take another step toward moving forward. My days began to feel lighter. The house that had once felt like a reminder of my failure became a place of quiet comfort. I redecorated, rearranging furniture and putting up artwork that felt more like me. I donated items that Emily had left behind, creating space for new beginnings. Mark continued to be a constant presence in my life, pushing me to step out of my comfort zone. One Friday night, he convinced me to join him and a few coworkers at a bar. "You don't have to meet anyone," he said. "Just come have a drink and relax for a change." I was hesitant, but I went. To my surprise, I enjoyed myself. The casual conversations, the laughter, and the sense of being surrounded by people who didn't know my story, it was refreshing. Over the weeks that followed, I began reconnecting with old friends and building new connections. I joined a local book club, started attending community events, and even signed up for a weekend photography workshop. Through these experiences, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried beneath the routine of marriage. I had forgotten how much I loved photography, how much joy I found in capturing the world through a lens. One evening, as I was flipping through the photos I had taken on a recent hike, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. Emily, on the other hand, was still facing the fallout of her actions. Word had spread through our social circles, and she had become something of an outcast. Her once thriving freelance career had dwindled, and she was struggling to rebuild her reputation. I didn't take pleasure in her struggles, but I couldn't deny the sense of justice. Actions have consequences, and she was living with hers. The biggest surprise came when I bumped into Aaron at a coffee shop. He was alone, scrolling through his phone, and didn't notice me at first. When he finally looked up, his face registered recognition in something that looked like guilt. "Ryan," he said awkwardly, standing up. "Hey." I didn't respond immediately, just stared at him, taking in the man who had played a part in dismantling my marriage. "Listen," he continued, "I'm sorry for everything. It wasn't right, and I know I crossed a line." I nodded slowly, my voice calm. "You did. But honestly, I'm past it now. I hope you've learned something from all of this." He looked down, clearly uncomfortable. "I have. And I really am sorry." I left without saying much else. I didn't need closure from him, and I didn't feel anger anymore. That part of my life was behind me, and I wasn't interested in dragging it forward. It's strange how time has a way of dulling even the sharpest pain. When I look back now, I can see the heartbreak and betrayal for what they were, moments in a chapter of my life, not the entire story. Emily's actions had hurt me deeply, but they had also forced me to confront truths about myself and my marriage. We had grown apart long before I discovered her profile on that dating app. The cracks had been there, small at first, but widening over time. I've come to realize that the betrayal wasn't just about her, it was also about me losing sight of my own needs and happiness. In trying to keep the marriage afloat, I had ignored my instincts, brushing off the warning signs because I didn't want to believe they were real. But now, I see things differently. In the months since Emily left, I've rebuilt my life in ways I never thought possible. My house feels like my home again, filled with reminders of who I am and who I want to be. My photography hobby has grown into a genuine passion, and I've even started showcasing my work at local art fairs. The friendships I've strengthened and the new connections I've made have shown me the importance of surrounding yourself with people who uplift and support you. As for Emily, I've heard bits and pieces about her life through mutual friends. She's still struggling, trying to rebuild both personally and professionally. I don't wish her harm, but I no longer feel responsible for her choices. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about excusing someone's behavior, it's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. I've forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. There's a peace in knowing that I can move forward without carrying the weight of the past. Looking ahead, I feel hopeful. I'm not rushing into anything, romantically or otherwise, but for the first time in a long time, I feel ready to embrace the future. If there's one lesson I've taken from this experience, it's that trust is the foundation of any relationship. Without it, even the strongest bonds will eventually crumble. But I've also learned the value of resilience, of picking yourself up when life knocks you down, and of rediscovering your worth. My journey isn't over, but I know now that I have the strength to face whatever comes next. And as I close this chapter of my life, I'm filled with a quiet sense of gratitude, not for the pain, but for the clarity it brought me. Sometimes, endings are just new beginnings in disguise.